Okay, we are almost done. 1970s to the end of the Cold War, which is in 1991. If you really believe that the Cold War truly ended, I mean, it ended, but did it really end? Current events. So, also great time to get into some current events with your students. Now, we're going to start with 11A, which is describe U.S. involvement in world affairs, including the end of the Cold War. So this is another example when I say what you're really focusing on is the first part of that TEK, describe U.S. involvement in world affairs. Anything that you can fit into that TEK means that 11A is the essential TEK. Everything you can fit into there is a part of that essential TEK. So if you taught the essential TEK right, you teach all those other things. That's why you only focus on that first part. But it does go into say, including the end of the Cold War. So you'll teach kind of how the Cold War ends and everything that is encompassed with that, like the fall of the Berlin Wall and the reunification of Germany and stuff like that. So you'll get into all of those things. The throwdown. I don't think that I mentioned the Iron Curtain to you when I was talking about Cold War, but yes, this is going to be the end of that, right? Like the Iron Curtain is not really going to be a thing anymore. Russia, Soviet Union is not really at its height anymore. It did lose a lot of money in trying to build up with the arms race and the space race and stuff like that. So they are going to fall. But at some point, mention the Iron Wall. Hopefully, you did during Cold War. So in 11A, we have 10C, which is describe U.S. involvement in the Middle East, such as support for Israel. So that's really important because supporting Israel and they're becoming a state is going to create the issue with OPEC, which is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, those Middle Eastern countries that have come together, and they are going to put an embargo on us, which is 17E, which is also a part of 11A. So when I would teach it one day, 11A, firstly, would be 10C, 14A, and 17E in that day. Okay, and I would do it in stations. So each section had a station. Supporting for Israel is tied to OPEC and the oil embargo. Tested with pictures of cars without gas, people in line trying to fill up their 1970s looking vehicles. So that's kind of the cue to students. We're talking about OPEC and the oil crisis. And OPEC has been a thing. It's always a thing. So this is something that you could tie to current events and stuff like that. But also tying to 27A, which is us learning that we've got to start providing our own energy. We've got to start finding alternative sources of energy, which is where we're really going to see an oil boom here in the United States because we're going to start getting our own. We're not going to just, take from OPEC and then experience shortages. So we have Camp David Accords, which is going to be President Carter discussing between Egypt and Israel a treaty. It's mainly like every time I see this tested, there's a picture of the representatives for Israel and Egypt shaking hands with Carter there holding on top of their hands. We also have the Iran hostage crisis, which is going to happen because we are going to support the ousted leader of Iran because he needs to get cancer treatment. So we're going to let him come to the United States, and they are going to take that as we support him rather than the country itself. And there's going to be some college kids rise up. They're going to take our they're going to take our foreign diplomats over there hostage, and they're going to hold them for 444 days, and they will not release them until President Reagan takes in office, kind of as a slight to Carter for not meeting their demands, and so they will be released there. An interesting fact, they never received reparations for that, even though they were promised it. And I think one of them died recently. So Marines in Lebanon, we are going to go to Lebanon to help the relocation to help with the Palestinian withdrawal. And this is kind of going to, include that kind of migration of people that identify the effects of population growth and distribution on the physical environment. That TEK doesn't necessarily mean the United States because it doesn't say so. It means anywhere. So do remember, why are we helping with the withdrawal of Palestinians? What is going on there? And you need to be tying that into what's going on with Israel becoming a state. What was going on before that? You may need to touch on that a little bit because remember, world history did not get into these modern day conflicts. So these students don't have an idea of what's going on between Israel and why is Israel becoming a state? Was it not always a state? What happened that they finally were able to become a state? Why are Palestinians withdrawing? Why are they having to be moved? What all is taking place? Okay. Now, you could always teach that the Marines in Lebanon, like there was a bombing in the barracks, but really it's about the distribution and population growth of a physical environment. So we want to know really what is taking place. Why is us supporting Israel such a problem for Middle Eastern countries? Why are Palestinians being moved being relocated and stuff like that. What's going on? They need to know what was going on over in the Middle East prior to and at this point in time. Okay, Camp David Accords we talked about. Okay, Iran-Contra affair. Did you know that Reagan had his own little scandal providing arms to Iran, Iran bought them from the United States. So we sell the arms to Iran. Iran pays for them, who has been declared a known terrorist group. So this is not supposed to be taking place. And then we give the money to fund to Contra, who is trying to overthrow their government. And so, and Reagan is going to be like, oh, they're similar to, us in early America and trying to take over in the revolution. And that's how he's going to liken it. And, he's really going to deny it for the most part. But it is going to come out that, yes, he is caught up in this. He is caught up in this scandal. So that's all of those right there. You also have 10A, a part of this grouping, which could be taught on a different day, which is describe Richard M. Nixon's leadership in the normalization of relations with China and the policy of détente. So we're normalizing relations again with China. We're trading with China again. And we're going to have more of a softening of relationships with the Soviet Union. Okay, and so that's pretty much that. Then we'll also have 10B, which is Ronald Reagan's leadership in domestic and international policies, including Reagan's economic policies and peace through strength. So what you're focusing on for this one, because we're talking about more foreign issues going on, is the peace through strength. He's very much like Theodore Roosevelt in the fact of speak softly but carry a big stick. It's very, very similar, so you can draw back to that understanding. But peace through strength is going to be that you build up a big military and you keep the peace because people are too scared to make you mad, and then you use your military on them. The next major essential TEK is going to be 10E, and that is where the other part of 10B is going to fit. The economic policies, which we often term the trickle-down economics. It is really the idea of giving tax breaks to big companies, and then that money will slowly make it down to the bottom worker where they'll make more money. And so this is a charged topic. But it is something that you can talk about. You can give both sides to the story, have the students decide what they think works best. Again, it's not really tested, but it is a really interesting thing for them to take away. In 10E, you'll also have 10D, which is describe the causes and key organizations of the conservatives' resurgence. So remember that silent majority. We're going to call it now the conservative resurgence. We won't call it the silent majority again, really, until Trump, I think. So the conservative resurgence of the 1980s, such as the Heritage Foundation and the Moral Majority. The Heritage Foundation is going to be like the Republican Watergate. Okay, so Heritage Foundation is like the think tank for the Republicans. That's where they go and hash out how they want to look at legislation and stuff like that. And then you have the Moral Majority, who is that conservative surge of people who are going to be voting towards more conservative policies. That resurgence of conservative ideals is going to be taking place, and it's really going to cover kind of what's going on during this time frame. You have 11B, identify significant social and political issues such as healthcare, immigration, and education from different viewpoints across the political spectrum. You are mainly going to focus 11B on that conservative resurgence of Ronald Reagan's time frame. And then we will also have in that time, 14B, identify the roles of governmental entities and private citizens in the managing an environment such as the establishment of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Endangered Species Act. All of those can be taught in the same day. And then on a second day with regard to 10E, you can teach 17D, which is Great Society, Affirmative Action, and Title IX. You've already taught it. You're just recovering the fact that it's actually taking place during this time. It is a civil rights issue, but it is taking place during the 1970s through 1990s time frame. 18C is describe the effects of political scandals. You're going to talk about Watergate. And then 18D, describe the role of the contemporary government legislation in the private and public sectors, such as the Community Reinvestment Act. This is actually going back to Carter, and him making it to where people of lower income can still get loans. So it'll have to be sectioned off in a right way, but these are all your domestic policies. So if you want to teach domestic by a timeline, you can do that, or you can group them in different ways, maybe set them up as stations and then have them make it through stations in 2 days, however you feel like it works best. Your next section is people, and that is going to start with 23A. Evaluate the contributions of significant political and social leaders in the U.S., such as Billy Graham and Sandra Day O'Connor. This ties in 24A, which is the art, music, film, and literature. 24C, which is various media contributions. And then 25D, which is contributions of women. And so you will tie in those. Of course, Billy Graham, famous charismatic preacher for that conservative resurgence movement, that majority movement that's taking place. And then you'll have Sandra Day O'Connor, which will be the first female Supreme Court justice. All right. And then lastly, you'll have tech. 26C, describe the effects of technological innovations, assembly line, manufacturing, and robotics. 27B, describe the free enterprise system as far as that drives technological innovations and application in the marketplace. Inexpensive personal computers and global positioning products. So we're going to see more of a move towards this. Really, what I focused on mostly with regard to tech was, we're going to start having some computers, that are going to resemble what laptops and cell phones and things like that. Those things are going to start coming out, but they don't look like what you know now. Maybe show them some pictures. How we've moved from the, record player, 8-track to the tape player, the cassette player, things like that. The floppy disks. I'm dating myself there. They probably don't know what those are. And then you'll have as well 26 and 27A, the tech innovations, telephone, satellite, petroleum-based product. That's going to be the oil movement here in the United States. Computers on economic development. And then you'll have 27A. Also, remember, this encompasses the 1980s, and we will have a huge movement in the stock market and housing. People are going to be making it rich in many, many different ways, things like that, using computers. And how this changes the standard of living. And you really would focus on, that hardship in that recession, everything going on in the 1970s. There is a surge of successful business people in the 1980s, and then the 1990s will hit a recession come the Bush administration. And then 1991 is when you will say, hey, by the way, Cold War done. You've gone through a lot of presidents also, because you go through LBJ, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, and Bush. You're going through a lot of presidents. And when you hit Ford and that Nixon scandal, you have to mention that Ford pardons Nixon. And although he's considered America's good old boy president, he is faulted kind of for pardoning Nixon. But there's a lot going on. You also hit, when you get into LBJ, you do hit right before then Kennedy's assassination. So a lot of presidents that you're hitting. We go through just a couple, and then all of a sudden we hit modern history, and then boom, presidents, right? Students are going to get kind of confused. This is a great time to start showing kids the presidents and maybe what they're connected to. That's a perfect word wall. Or this president is these things, because those things are your vocabulary, and associating them with the president's a good idea. But anyways, it's 1970s, 1990s. This unit is difficult to teach if you're not used to the foreign events, the foreign affairs that are taking place. If you're not used to the domestic and foreign policies, it's a tough unit to get through. So consider that really, really studying. Look up a lot of things, notes, things that I haven't given you. Maybe if you want to look up something else to get through this unit. And the 1990s to present is also very similar. So these are two difficult units to teach if you don't know your information, if you don't know your content. So I only graze over it. If you need to know more, you're more than welcome to come and talk to me, and we can discuss that TEK that you don't know very well. Or I can, if you'd rather study it on your own, I can provide you the information that you need to do so. Okay. Happy DJ.